You've been deceived. They told you that a woman with high spiritual power is gentle, endlessly nurturing, a celestial guide who saves broken men, that her role is to heal, to soothe, to sacrifice. But Freud saw something far more dangerous. He warned that where we imagine purity, the unconscious often hides a hunger for power. From childhood, you were sold this myth, that the spiritual woman is morally superior, endlessly patient, a healer of wounds, that her love will lift you, complete you, make you whole. But what if this was never true? What if the very image of the divine feminine has blinded you to something far more dangerous and far more real? Think about it. Why do so many men collapse around women who radiate not just beauty, but depth? Why do they feel unsettled in her presence, as if she sees something they don't want revealed? Because she does. A woman with high spiritual power doesn't just reflect back your charm or your strength. She reflects your shadow. She exposes the cracks you've spent your whole life hiding. And here's the brutal reality. Most men can't stand that reflection. They retreat, they attack, or they break under the weight of what she awakens in them. This is the dark truth Freud hinted at. The spiritual woman is not an angel sent to rescue you. She is the storm that tests your foundation. And most modern men, they aren't built to withstand it. This is the truth no therapist will spell out for you, because once you glimpse it, you cannot unsee it. The only question is, will you keep clinging to the fantasy of the gentle spiritual woman, or are you ready to confront the power that Freud warned us about? By the end of this video, you'll either resent me for exposing this, or you'll never look at spiritually powerful women the same way again. Society has sold you a fairy tale. The myth of the spiritual woman as a saintly figure, a selfless giver, a vessel of unconditional love. From Hollywood romances to Instagram wellness gurus, the story is always the same. She is pure. She is safe. She exists to guide men back to themselves. But Freud saw what hides beneath the veil. He argued that idealization is never innocent. The moment you place someone on a pedestal, you are no longer seeing them. You are projecting your own need for salvation. And the so-called divine feminine has become one of the most powerful projections in human history. Think of the countless films where a lost, broken man is saved by a woman whose patience seems infinite. She listens, she heals, she sacrifices, and he becomes whole. That is the illusion. Real life doesn't look like that. Real spiritual women don't just absorb your wounds, they awaken the very parts of you you've been running from. Freud's case studies showed this again and again. Men weren't destroyed by cruel women. They were undone by women who forced them to see their unconscious fears. He described patients who fell into panic, rage, even physical illness when confronted with female figures they idealized as holy, only to discover those women wielded an authority beyond their control. And modern psychology echoes this. Research from the University of Cambridge found that men consistently underestimate the psychological impact of women who exhibit strong spiritual conviction. They imagine such women as nurturing, only to experience intimidation, even fear, when their inner authority confronts them. This is where the myth cracks open. The spiritual woman is not simply gentle. Her patience is not passivity, it is power. Her silence is not weakness, it is a mirror. When she doesn't rescue you, when she doesn't absorb your chaos, you feel abandoned. But in reality, she is testing the very foundation of your being. For women watching, this isn't condemnation, it's recognition. You know this force within yourself, the sense that your presence alone shifts the atmosphere in a room. For men, it is a warning. What you've been told is comfort is, in fact, confrontation. The gentle spiritual woman you were promised doesn't exist. What exists is far more dangerous and far more transformative. And that truth changes everything about how men and women meet each other in the modern world. And if that unsettles you, it should. Because the next question is even darker. What if her spirituality isn't just comfort or inspiration, but a hidden language of the unconscious? one that can shape how you think, how you act, even who you believe yourself to be? This is exactly what Freud uncovered in his most controversial cases. And once you hear them, you'll understand why men throughout history have feared women with high spiritual power more than any sword or crown. Freud believed that women's spirituality was never just innocence or purity. Beneath the surface, he saw dreams, rituals, and symbols as the unconscious reaching out, not merely to express itself, but to influence. Not through brute force, but through something far more disturbing: the ability to unsettle men by confronting them with truths they could not bear. One of the most haunting examples comes from the very birth of psychoanalysis, the case of Anna O. Outwardly, she appeared fragile, consumed by strange visions, slipping into trances where she spoke in poetic, symbolic language. To her family, it looked like a sickness. But Freud and Joseph Breuer recognized something deeper. Her unconscious was speaking, and its voice was so powerful it pulled even her doctor into its gravity. The climax came one night when Breuer was called urgently to her bedside. Anna was screaming, writhing in pain, and insisting she was about to give birth to Breuer's child, a false pregnancy, born not of biology, but of psychic force. In that moment, her unconscious overwhelmed the boundaries of the clinical room and invaded Breuer's personal life. He managed to calm her with hypnosis, but the damage was done. Terrified, Breuer cut the treatment short and fled on a sudden trip with his wife, desperate to salvage his marriage. Later accounts even suggest that this journey was a second honeymoon, a frantic attempt to repair the cracks that Anna's power had opened in his home. Think about that. A young woman, dismissed as hysterical, shook the foundation of a respected physician's career, his family, his identity, not through seduction, not through violence, but through the sheer force of her unconscious spilling into his world. Another case, that of Dora, revealed the same pattern. She came to Freud as a nervous young woman, seemingly delicate. But when she described her dreams, symbols of burning houses, hidden betrayals, they unmasked the desires and hypocrisies of the men around her. Her unconscious didn't only speak for her, it unsettled every man it implicated. Freud himself admitted her defiance rattled him, forcing him to see how powerfully a woman's inner world could destabilize the structures men relied on. This is what Freud meant when he warned that the unconscious always returns. Women like Anna O and Dora didn't just experience visions or symptoms. They became vessels through which the unconscious erupted, and men who came too close found themselves exposed. And modern research confirms this is not a relic of the past. A 2018 study in the Journal of Social Psychology found that men rated women with strong spiritual conviction as both more attractive and more intimidating. The researchers called it charismatic dissonance, the paradox of being pulled toward a woman and yet feeling destabilized by her authority, desire fused with fear. You think she's tender? In reality, she is reading your unconscious. And here's the part most men miss. Your unconscious is already reading her too. That's why in her presence you feel stripped bare, even when she hasn't spoken. For women, this is recognition, the silent authority that changes the energy of a room, the gaze that makes men stumble, the presence that unsettles more than words ever could. For men, it is the nightmare hidden beneath the myth. The spiritual woman is not your safe harbor. She is the storm that reveals whether your foundation can withstand her power. And history shows most men cannot. What you've just seen in Freud's cases is only the beginning. Because this tension between men and spiritually powerful women is not confined to the clinic, it runs through centuries of history. Every time women carried symbols, visions, or prophecy, they shook the world around them, and men responded with fear. The question is, why has this fear been so persistent? To answer that, we have to step back and look at the long arc of history, where priestesses, witches, and prophets stood at the crossroads of awe and terror. Long before Freud, humanity had already sensed the unsettling force of spiritually powerful women. In ancient civilizations, they were revered as priestesses and oracles. In Delphi, men traveled across the Mediterranean to kneel before the Pythia, a woman whose visions shaped the fate of empires. Her words carried such weight that kings paused wars to await her prophecy. Imagine that, armies waiting not for a sword, but for a woman's voice. But reverence and fear always walked together. The same cultures that worshipped oracles also feared their unpredictability. Spiritual authority was tolerated only when it served the state. The moment it became uncontrollable, it was branded dangerous. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and that fear ignited into flames. Women who spoke of visions, who healed through herbs, who gathered followers around their charisma, they were no longer called priestesses. They were called witches. The witch hunts that spread across Europe were not just about superstition. They were about control. Men feared women whose inner authority could not be silenced, so they demonized it, burned it, erased it from the record. But the pattern never disappeared. In the 19th century, spiritualist movements swept across Europe and America. Seances led by women drew crowds of men, politicians, scientists, writers, who were simultaneously fascinated and unsettled by the authority of a female medium. These women spoke in trances, delivered messages from the dead, and carried an aura of mystery that destabilized the rational world. Men believed they controlled. Some were celebrated. Many were ridiculed, but none were ignored. And even today, the archetype remains. Think of the female gurus, healers, and charismatic leaders who attract global audiences. They are adored by their followers, yet also provoke suspicion and fear. To men who approach them unprepared, their presence feels dangerous because it confronts something primal. The unconscious recognition that spiritual women hold a kind of power that cannot be measured, debated, or dismissed. For women, this lineage is a reminder. Your force has always been there. From oracles to mystics, from witches to modern teachers, the thread is unbroken. The world may change its language, priestess, witch, healer, guru. But the essence remains the same. Men sense your power, and their fear becomes the proof of it. For men, this history is a warning. You have been told that fear of women's spiritual authority is outdated, a relic of superstition. But history suggests otherwise. Across time and culture, the pattern repeats. Men either kneel in awe or lash out in fear. And if you think modernity has made you immune, ask yourself, why do so many men still mock, dismiss, or retreat from women whose presence they cannot control? The answer is simple. Because deep down, they know what Freud knew. The spiritual woman is not safe. She is transformative, and transformation has always terrified those who cling to power. History shows us the pattern. Men kneel in awe before spiritually powerful women, or they try to silence them. But that pattern didn't vanish with the past. It lives inside modern relationships, modern fears, modern men. The real question is this. If ancient kings and priests couldn't endure such power, how can the modern man possibly withstand it? Freud's conclusion was unsettling. The spiritual power of women activates the deepest fears in men, the unconscious terror of losing control, even the primal fear of castration. To stand before a woman whose presence is spiritually commanding is, for many men, to feel their masculinity dissolve. This is why modern men, raised on the promise of easy love and simple relationships, collapse when faced with women who carry genuine inner authority. They expect comfort. They find a mirror. And that mirror does not flatter. It exposes. Think about the way men describe spiritually powerful women today. They say she is too much, too intense, too intimidating. But what does too much really mean? It means she reflects back his inadequacy. His inability to face questions like, who am I? What do I truly believe? What am I afraid of? These are existential questions, and most men would rather run from them than sit in their fire. Freud warned that men often protect themselves with illusions of control, status, logic, dominance. But the spiritually powerful woman dismantles those illusions without lifting a finger. In her presence, he feels small, unmoored, like a child caught pretending to be a king. Here lies the paradox. The higher she rises spiritually, the smaller he feels in her presence. The very qualities that make her radiant, conviction, depth, clarity, are the ones that shrink him. What should inspire him instead humiliates him, because his foundation is too weak to stand beside her without crumbling. Consider the stories we hear in modern relationships. A man dates a woman deeply grounded in her spiritual practice. At first, he is fascinated by her rituals, her inner calm. But soon, he feels judged, exposed. When she meditates, he hears his own restlessness. When she speaks of purpose, he hears his lack of it. What began as attraction becomes unbearable pressure, and so he retreats, dismissing her as too complicated. This is not her weakness. This is his fear. And that fear is everywhere. Surveys in the US and UK show that men consistently rate women with strong convictions as less approachable, even as they admit being drawn to them. Attraction fused with avoidance, desire laced with fear. For women, this truth is liberation. You have been told your power is too much, when in fact, it is exactly what unmasks the insecurities of men who cannot hold it. For men, this truth is confrontation. The gentle, spiritual woman you imagine does not exist. The woman before you is not your healer. She is your test. Most men collapse in the presence of a spiritually powerful woman, but not all. There are a few who don't retreat, who don't shatter. They remain. They stay in the storm, and something extraordinary happens. What could have been destruction becomes transformation. Freud warned men that spiritually powerful women awaken unconscious fears: fear of losing control, fear of exposure, fear of becoming small. But Jung went further. He said that when a man meets such a woman, he is not simply meeting her, he is meeting his anima, the hidden feminine within himself. And when a woman meets such a man, she touches her animus, the inner masculine that drives her to expand. Two unconscious forces collide, and if neither side flees, both are reborn. If you want me to dive deeper into Jung's vision of anima and animus, the hidden feminine in men, the hidden masculine in women, and how these forces create true balance when they meet, let me know in the comments. I will dedicate an entire video to uncovering that map. This is the secret few dare to admit. Only a strong man can stand beside a strong woman, not because he dominates her, and not because he diminishes her, but because he recognizes her power without fear. He does not try to cut her down to fit his comfort. He allows her to be vast, and in her vastness, he expands too. And here lies the paradox most men never grasp. The higher she rises, the more he grows. The more he grows, the more she flourishes. Instead of a zero-sum game, their union becomes an upward spiral. His strength doesn't cage her, it frees her. Her power doesn't emasculate him, it fortifies him. Together they step into a realm beyond the fragile myths of who saves whom. Think of it like this. Beside a weak man, a powerful woman feels caged. She must shrink to avoid breaking him. But beside a strong man, she can finally shed her armor. She can wield her fire without fear of scorching him. She can embrace her tenderness without fear of being dismissed. She can be fierce, gentle, chaotic, serene, fully herself. And he in turn learns to shed his own armor. He discovers that strength is not in silence but in honesty, not in control but in courage. He learns to trust his intuition, to open his emotions, to face the shadows within himself, because he has a partner strong enough to hold that journey with him. This is not weakness, this is alchemy. Freud's warning becomes the foundation. Don't run from women who awaken your unconscious. If you flee, you remain small. But if you stay, you are reforged, you become steel. And in that steel, a union is formed that nothing can break. For women, this is recognition. Your power is not too much. It is exactly enough to test, to refine, to transform. You are not fragile muses waiting to rescue or be rescued. You are the storm that awakens the truth. And if men fear you, it is because they feel the force of that awakening. For men, this is the challenge: to stay when every instinct tells you to run, to endure when the mirror of her presence exposes your cracks, to resist the urge to belittle her just to protect your ego. Because if you can endure, if you can choose growth over retreat, you will not be the same man you were before. You will be greater. And here is the catharsis. When such a woman and such a man meet, it is not the end of either. It is the beginning of both. Their bond is not built on illusions, but on truth, not on fragility, but on fire. It is a union that bends, but does not break, a love that refines rather than rescues. So here is your choice, women. Will you continue to dim your power to comfort fragile men, or will you rise fully, knowing your presence alone can remake the world? Men, will you keep clinging to the fantasy of safety, or will you step into the storm, embrace the mirror, and be reborn as steel? This is not a metaphor. This is the psychology Freud uncovered, the vision Jung expanded, the truth history has whispered for centuries. A spiritually powerful woman is not your end. She is your beginning. And if you have the courage to stay, you will not just survive her presence, you will soar with her. So now I want to hear from you. Women, tell me, what kind of strength do men most often fail to withstand? And men, be honest. Which aspect of a woman's power feels the most overwhelming to you? Your answers matter because they reveal the patterns we all carry. Every answer brings us closer to understanding not only ourselves but each other, the hidden forces that unite men and women beyond illusion. And if you don't want to miss it, make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next will take us even further beyond the veil, into the very architecture of the unconscious. I'll see you in the next chapter.